Thank you for purchasing the JPM VCM Rebuild video. In this video, we will demonstrate how to properly rebuild your VCM 40. This video also applies to the 25 and 44. There are slight differences between the models and the model years, so don't be alarmed if your machine does not look exactly like the one in the video. Each machine is going to require a rebuild kit from VCMparts.com. Before we get started, you go ahead and grab your recommended tools for the job. We're going to need a flathead screwdriver, a hammer, a pry bar, a rubber mallet, an impact driver or electric drill, a putty knife to remove debris, vice grips, a 5mm Allen, snap ring pliers, a few brass punches, and you'll see why later in the video, a 13mm wrench, and also a 10mm wrench. We're also going to need a 13mm socket accompanied by his ratchet. And you will also need some food-grade silicone and the top nut wrench set to remove the top nut from the dough blade, and a bowl seal wrench to remove and reinstall the bowl seal correctly. And do not forget your safety glasses. Let's get started. First thing, we need to clear the bowl, so remove the left-handed thread top nut and all attachments inside the machine. Go ahead and grab your bowl seal wrench or large channel lock pliers and unscrew the bowl seal and discard it. Next, remove the small flathead screws in the shaft sleeve. And it'd be a good idea to get a baggie and start storing these bolts in the bag so you do not lose anything. Next, go ahead and grab your 5mm Allen and attach it to your vice grips. This will give you the extra length and leverage to get those screws under the bowl. You're going to start taking off the 6mm bolts on this spin-off disc. The shaft sleeve is still attached to this and sometimes gets glued to it from sticky dough or any other debris that gets down there. So go ahead and get your flathead screwdriver and break the two half moons apart. Next, start with the bottom motor cover. Tilt the machine on its side and take off sometimes there's 3 or there's 4 bolts down there, depending on your machine and when it was made. Slide off your motor cover and set it aside. Next, we will grab our 13mm wrench and remove the side bolts on this counterweight. Carefully pull off the counterweight and also set it aside. Remove the snap ring in front of the motor fan and carefully pop off this fan. Sometimes this fan is also metal. Just got to be careful prying on it, they do snap. After removing the fan, go ahead and remove the 4 13mm nuts from the rear housing. We break them free with a ratchet and then come back and get the rest with an impact drill. After the nut's removed, remove the keyway from the bottom of the shaft and also the last retaining or snap ring. Now you're ready to remove the armature. With the machine on its side, slowly and carefully hit the top of the shaft. Place a piece of wood or plastic in between the hammer and the top of the shaft to prevent damage. What you're doing here is releasing that upper bearing from the upper casting. It's a good idea to have someone hanging on to that bottom of that rear housing as it's slowly coming out, just to make sure that it doesn't fall. Because if it falls, it's going to damage the windings on the inside of the motor. But I very carefully tap it until I know it's just about ready to break free. And I carefully remove it. You want to remove it straight out and not hit any of the windings with the tip of the shaft. If you didn't remove the shaft sleeve before, go ahead and retrieve that from the bowl. And if the upper motor bearing decides to stay up in the upper casting, go ahead and get a thin piece of metal and hit it at an angle from inside the bowl, and you should be able to pop it out. Now with the stator laying on its side, go ahead and remove the 3 bolts covering the lower bearing. This would be your 10mm wrench. Before you remove that bottom bearing cap, you need to remove the bottom keyway. If your keyway is stuck, simply take your vice grips, attach it to the keyway, and hammer it out like shown. Remove the bearing cap, and then remove the lower housing. Lastly, remove the snap ring in front of the lower bearing, and it's ready to be pressed out. This is where the brass punches come into play. You're going to use them to go ahead and remove the old bearings that are pressed onto that shaft. You can use a bearing puller here, although it's a little bit difficult with the long shaft. The bearing puller is going to work a little bit better on the lower bearing. And you'll notice there is a ring behind that bearing. Make sure that ring stays there. Go ahead and tap on your new bearings until they reach the press point. And you can either press them on yourself or go to a local machine shop and have them use their arbor press to press them on. We are using an arbor press here. We press in the upper bearing first, and then use 2 aluminum standoff blocks to carefully press in the lower bearing. Even pressure will prevent the bearing from getting damaged. Before reinstalling the stator, make sure that everything is clean and clear. There should be no debris left inside there. Sometimes the old two-piece bearings, when you remove it, they fall apart, and roller bearings can actually fall into the stator without you knowing. So go ahead and put your hand back there and make sure there's no debris. And when you're reinstalling the new bearing in there, there should be some resistance when you're pressing it in. If there's not, then you can have a wallowed out upper housing. We can repair those in the shop. You can find our contact info at vcmparts.com. So go ahead and line up that rear housing with threads, and it won't go on all the way until you hammer it in a little bit. So this is the point in which you want to feel a little bit of resistance. If it just plops right in, then your upper bearing is going to be loose, and that can cause damage to your bowl seal, because as there's load on your dough blade or your cutting assembly, it's actually moving that entire shaft around. You don't want that. Reinstall the 4 nuts using your 13mm socket. Go ahead and reinstall the retaining ring. And also install the keyway. And make sure it's fully seated so your fan can install properly. Line up the keyway and pop on your fan using your hand or a rubber mallet. Make sure the screen is clear. And also align your fan. You'll see 2 broken fins on there. Align those broken fins up, and that allows you to get in there and reinstall those nuts. Put on your washer first. Before reinstalling your spin-off disc, go ahead and inspect it for corrosion. These pits mean that water is going to seep past this and have a chance of ruining your brand new upper bearing. And if you check out vcmparts.com, you can find a new spin-off disc available. This ensures a proper water spin-off and helps protect the upper bearing. Go ahead and reinstall the motor cover and attach it using the 3 or 4 bolts, depending on your model. If your motor cover is corroded, and deteriorating, like a lot of them are, you can find a replacement stainless steel motor cover on our website. Bring the machine back up vertical and apply one line of silicone to the spin-off disc. This will hold your two halves together while you bolt them together. Lightly tighten one side before going to the other. You don't want to over torque one side and make it sit crooked on the shaft. You want it to sit evenly. You also want to make sure that you don't install it too low or too high, because it can actually rub on that upper housing there and make a nasty noise while it's running. After it's torqued evenly, you go ahead and make your adjustments with a flathead screwdriver and make sure that there's plenty of clearance there. So go ahead and install your shaft sleeve immediately while the silicone's still wet. After installing the two screws, this would be a good time to clean up your machine and wash your hands. Go ahead and apply the lubricant to the outside of the new shaft sleeve. Go ahead and take your new bowl seal and apply a generous amount of lubricant to the O-ring and on the inside of the bowl seal. You will wipe away the excess after the installation. And we highly recommend you do this at least once a month. Take your bowl seal out, clean it out, and apply new lubricant. This is going to increase the life of your bowl seal, because there's a lot of heat and friction generated with this inherent design of the machine. When installing the bowl seal, it's important to not cross-thread it and to not over-tighten it. To prevent cross-threading, use a bowl seal wrench and apply even downward pressure on both hands and go counterclockwise until you feel a click. That click is the first thread starting, and then you're able to go clockwise and screw it tight. After it is hand tight, go 1/8 of a turn. Now you're ready to test the machine. Go ahead and make sure the bowl is clear of parts. Close the lid, wire up your machine, and give it a test. It should sound similar to this.